Hi, welcome to Consider This. I'm Melisa Idris.
And I'm Sharaad Kuttan.
Today we're going to be looking at efforts to reform the Senate, or the Upper House of Parliament, or better known as Dewan Negara to many of us. Now, joining us on the show, we have Senator Yusmadi Yusof, who's chairman of the Senate Reform Working Committee. So the Senate Reform Working Committee is essentially a bipartisan initiative structured to improve and strengthen the Upper House of Parliament. And the idea is to make sure that the Senate is a proper check and balance in terms of being a democratic institution. So welcome to the show, Senator.
Thank you, Melisa.
All right.
Okay, so let me begin if I can. The issue of the function of Dewan Negara and maybe even public perceptions of Dewan Negara. I don't even know if many Malaysians know it exists, how much it costs, and what value it brings to the parliamentary process. Could you help us? Since you're a senator, what's your experience been? Are people surprised when you say you're a senator?
Yeah, and I'm unique. I was in Dewan Rakyat, I was lower house. Now I'm the upper house, and the best person to tell you. Dewan Negara, or parliament, is just like a heart. You have two parts. How does to make the heart function? You need two parts to function. So can you imagine, people only know about the first part, not that we're silent about the second part. So that's what this reform is about. So for me, its role is to play as a revising body, a platform for influential discussions, and also to play a role as they call it like determining institutions of important legislations where you can delay certain legislation. It doesn't use the word veto.
Right.
So why I say this, because that was said in the Reid Commission at least. The ideals of Dewan Negara was by design, because we know a certain country, they don't have a bicameral. They have unicameral. What does it mean? Unicameral mean like Singapore. They only have one house. In our case, we choose to have two houses. Must be with reason.
Right, but it wasn't modeled on the British upper house, which is the House of Lords. We don't have that institution, do we?
Otherwise, you have to call me Lord Yusmadi.
Oh, that's nice.
I will be permanently there, But unfortunately, yes, we did take the Westminster concept. But when it trickled down to our society or our landscape, political landscape, it been translated into our local context. For example, we are a federal state. Dewan Negara is supposed to be the voice of states, the voice of a strategic interest parties. Okay. For example, the disabled, you have the representative of
indigenous groups.
Indigenous group, Orang Siam.
Orang Siam, there's always been a Thai senator.
So of course the question is now, why you have Orang Siam, but you not even have Ibang Kadazan? Can you imagine? So all these questions for me is relevant in this 21st century, especially after the change of government. For example, states like Perlis, small state, you have two representatives.
Right.
States like Sabah, Sarawak, bigger, but you have two representatives.
In fact, they might now say they're not a state as the states of the Federation of Malaya,
but equal to.
They're territories. Yes. They have one or three territories.
So just to take the opportunity, that's why I think, at least my personal experience, I would like to see that Dewan Negara as a platform to unite, a platform to be the voice of the states. So in other words, by popular democracy, some people being elected, but some minority groups not elected.
Right.
But this is an opportunity to bring these people
to
the houses.
Just to interject there for a quick second, I mean, I like what you're saying. There are relevant questions that need to be asked or looked at in this day and age, but I think the really kind of the key consideration here is to address the perception that Dewan Negara is seen to be a rubber stamp. It's seen to be a way for politicians to get into parliamentary system through the back door.
Okay, I have to say the perception is partly correct.
Okay.
When I say partly correct, in the sense, of course, people are looking at, for the last 60 years, where are examples or instances where Dewan Negara really, put their strong decisions? Of course, none. But I have to say this, it happened in different way. Number one, for example, even before the change of government, you see SST was passed. We thought SST will never be passed because you have more numbers of Barisan Nasional senators.
Isn't that a financial law, though?
Yes, but
and
what I'm saying,
Senate does not involve itself in
okay,
financial laws.
What happened? We can delay it, but in the case of SST, it was not even delayed. It was unanimously agreed by all the senators. But you see different thing for fake news. All these things happen before the reform reports. So what I'm trying to say, we have to really understand what kind of parliamentary democracy that we want. Do we want the parliamentary democracy where Dewan Negara can stop legislation, or we want Dewan Negara just to be a revising body, rationalize what is good or get the priority right. Say for example, yes, the law was passed, but I was there how the departure levy bill was argued. Frankly speaking, despite it was sponsored by my government, I was kind of persuaded by the argument by my learned friend. I know senator, most of them are learned. They are not like they're appointed because of sometimes they're professional, they're lawyers. So I said, actually, this guy has a good argument. Why? How come you promote tourism by imposing departure levy? And now we are talking about it. That departure levy is somehow not a right way to do blah, blah, blah. There's a backlash.
So there is a kind of effect. It is changing. Because coming out of this idea of a rubber stamp, there's also this perception that that people who are senators are given the position as a reward. It's a sinecure. Yeah. It's an old Roman term meaning you get money for nothing, basically. You know, but is that true, or is there a mixed bag within the Senate? In your experience, especially as a parliamentarian, did you ever find that you had good senators and not so great senators?
I try to be diplomatic. Because earlier I was losing my hair because I'm working very hard. The day I joined, I moved the Dewan. Now we have a Senate Reform Working Committee, which is not, I can choose not to do it. Because there's no initiative. But I think it's my commitment because we promised Rakyat through the last election manifesto. What he said is partly correct, because what happened now, you have two types of appointments. One is from the states. The states, normally, the party leader of the state will choose their candidates. Then those who are selected, normally, those who are closely associated with the leadership of the day. But at the same time, you have someone like, for example, orang asli, orang Siam, they are truly, at least what I see in Parliament now, they are at least the former Ketua Pengarah Jabatan Orang Asli, say for example. There's one guy representing Orang Siam, he's truly a leader of Orang Siam. But of course, when talk about democracy, what is democracy? Democracy is not about something happen in isolation. It must be a process. But where is the voice of consultation? Where is the voice of selection? So what you are saying is correct as well. So that's why this reform, among others, we also talk about how it was appointed for the last 60 years.
Right.
So we explore so many models. So the model that I find quite interesting is the one introduced by Tudu in Canada, where you can have an independent advisory committee where anyone can apply. I met an independence lady from Canada, was a former badminton coach of Canada who came to Malaysia. I met her. She was very fantastic. She said, you know, Yusmadi, it's not easy for me to be this senator because I went through serious interview, serious vetting process. Okay. So now I'm elected. So,
okay, I want to ask you a very quick question. We go for the break. Just in 10 seconds, who won't want this? Who will resist change of Dewan Negara to become a truly democratic institution and value to parliamentary process?
For me, it starts with political will. So when I see there's no initiative by the last regime, I say there's no politically by the previous regime. So the current regime, at least they say it, they put in writing, then
in
they
the
want
manifesto,
to do it.
right?
Yeah. So now at least I just evaluate what at least I saw Anwar Ibrahim led the Dewan Rakyat parliamentary reform. So I lead the Senate reform. So we're supposed to join the committee soon. So what I'm trying to say is very much about the will of government of the day. And now, for me now, I've seen differently the will of the people.
Okay.
I am pushed by the people.
We're going to continue this conversation right here on Consider This. Make sure you stay tuned right here. Welcome back to Consider This. I'm Melisa Idris with Sharaad, Kuttan, and on the show we have with us Senator Yusmadi Yusof. We're talking about reforms to the Senate or Dewan Negara. So you have this report out, right? So as part of the Senate Reform Working Committee, you've made several recommendations on how to have innovations in the Senate. What are some of the proposals that you've put forth?
Out of 37 pages, it has 9 recommendations. So out of 9, I can divide into 3. The first one is about introducing the relevant legislations. You need the law. because in 1963 we used to have Parliamentary Services Act. You need a piece of legislation to draw a line between the three branches of important entity, you know, the legislature, judiciary, and also the executive. So currently we don't have that. We need to draw a line because otherwise we don't have independency. Number two, I also talk about the content of the Senate. For example, the issue of gender equality, the issue of appointments, the issue of select committee, how you need to have a special committee to vet through certain irrelevant proposed legislations. And thirdly, I also talk about support system, because we are talking about today, after 60 years, senator or parliamentarians not even have research assistants, not even have their own office, and unfortunately, this thing I have to make it public. The support staff in parliament is not good enough, because I talked to them. They said, no, YB, sometimes we even have to sleep in the printing room. Can you do something more organized? I said, what is that? You know, from Dewan Rakyat to Dewan Negara, at least we have gaps. So these are little things I think must be looked into in order to give a total effect for a reform and better parliament.
But isn't it also true that the Dewan Negara gets quite a big chunk of the parliamentary budget? I mean, if they're not spending it on a bunk bed for staff, and they're not spending it on researchers,
almost a third of the
so what are they
budget goes
spending
there.
this money on?
So I was told by the parliament staff, at least in last budget we spent about 114, if I'm not mistaken, millions for parliament, and 1/3 meant for Dewan Negara. So you have a point, because for me, I have a chance to travel to other parliaments. When you're talking about democracy, parliamentary democracy, you're talking about participation, transparency. So if you build up structure, blocks, which is more expensive, what does it mean? It can be highly immoral politically. So how at the same time talk about reform, at the same time you're talking about building up another blocks to reform. So I see your point, but for me it has to start somewhere. So the somewhere that I'm looking at now, especially how to make parliamentarian become effective, at least to have good debates, at least to argue something important, at least to use the taxpayer money effectively. So at least when I asked Tun Mahathir in one dialogue, I said, Prime Minister, being someone who was a senator, what do you see that we can reform? So he said, I would love to see good debates. So for me, good debate matters, because you need good laws for the society.
Okay, so you're saying that better support for senators will allow them to debate issues better in parliament. And if I'm not mistaken as well, you know, Dewan Negara can also propose new laws, but that's something that we're not seeing very much in the Senate, are we?
Yeah. Theoretically speaking, the law can come from the upper house to the lower house. But of course, it didn't happen.
I mean,
Why?
it hasn't happened in 60 years.
Yeah, why? Of course, is a question of politics. You are talking about you've been led by one party, rule party for the last 60 years. But for me, if it were to happen, it has another stumbling block. You cannot even talk about financial bills. So for me, not everything about financial. You can talk about, say, on sustainability. You can talk about disabled. You can talk about, say, for example, marginalized. For example, now the issue of employment, you know, youth employment. These are all the critical issues. So for me, that I hope will happen.
Okay.
If this reform go through.
So we want quality conversation in Parliament. Of course, that is dependent on the quality of the people at the Dewan Negara. And there's a guideline for appointments. And I want to just to kind of inform our audience that a part of the people in Dewan Negara are there because of the state legislatures that nominate them or elect them. And then there are nominations that come, as you said, special interest groups and such. Is there a possibility, because this has already been proposed by Abid and Mukre, some ideas, that actually we open Dewan Negara up to elections, popular elections, maybe even using a different system, not first past the post, obviously, but something like proportional representation. Would you be open to that idea?
In fact, it was discussed, because in other parts of jurisdiction like Australia, there was a form of election. So for me, yeah, it's not a bad idea. It is one option being practiced. Whether it works. So the question is now, what is our priority now, especially now, the state of economy, blah, 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 blah. So the point I want to say is that, what is the issue here is that, for me, the issue, for me, at least I'm convinced, to get the right people. You can get the right people. Of course, one of those is election. One of those is maybe through a proper mechanism of process.
Right.
Like I said, the one in
the guidelines.
The
and
guidelines.
Such. Okay.
For example, nowadays, let's have a special seat for people from the arts, orang seni, maybe people from the chambers, or maybe people from
the media.
The media.
I would love to be a senator.
And you know what? After I reviewed this report, no, you're not wrong. I've been getting so many calls. They thought that I have a power to recommend them. I don't want to mention it, but they say, Ismail, can you recommend my name? I said, I have no power. It has to come from the Prime Minister or the party state leaders. So at least for me, I'm very happy. At least things are responsive. People start asking questions. So for me, this reform is not about me, about even Dewan Negara. It's still about the very promise of our constitution, how our parliamentary democracy must have another venue called Dewan Negara, and that Dewan Negara is supposed to be the revising body.
Right.
So I think, I hope rakyat see how important, how significant is Dewan Negara.
Well, that's true. So there has to be some kind of, I guess, education in that respect for the public as to the role of Dewan Negara of the Senate, right? But also, there should be some education for the senators themselves. Now, you're right to say that some senators have expertise in different fields, but are they kind of aware of what their roles are within the upper house of the parliament? So one of your proposals is to set up a Senate Academy, essentially to kind of train senators as to their role, right?
Okay, democracy is about habits of the heart. How to build that habits of the heart, it doesn't start from certain educational process. When it didn't happen in school, it didn't happen in your high school, it didn't happen in your university, it has to happen somewhere. So I think it's not too late to have parliamentary academy or parliamentary institute. For example, you can have universities collaborate with parliament. And it's happening. And I have to put on record here, under the leadership of current speaker, Dato' Arif himself, I think being someone who was academician, someone who was learned as a judge whatsoever, almost every weekend we have program, we have forum, we have stakeholder engagement in parliament. So the question is that I want it to go a step further. I don't want it like ad hoc process. So now, apart from this parliamentary proposal, what is happening in parliament now, we have a new things like what they call it, CSO, parliamentarians, caucuses. So recently, we initiated something on sustainability, led by Marichin, YB Marichin, and also participated by many prominent civil society leaders. But of course, I think, is that good enough? I say not good enough. There are many other issues. For example, today, I was invited to go to other country on intelligence and security. You are talking about so many other things. So for me, bottom line, we have to tell rakyat, democracy in Malaysia is not only happen in 4 years or 5 years. It can happen every day during any session. So for me, we have to educate, and in order to do that, I think we need to create more media specialists or media, I would say, concerned reporters who come to Dewan Negara. I have that problem because I have to put on record here. One editor told me, Ismadi, you know why we have less media to cover your house? 2 reasons. Number one, you guys not dramatic enough. I said, fine, you want me to shout? I can shout.
Not dramatic enough.
Yeah. Because sometimes you're a journalist, you know.
It's not good TV.
Because recently, I give for example, what was the news was covered recently become big hoo-ha. There's one senator, last part of his debate, he said, Yang Mulia Dewan, Menteri, can you consider a law to protect men for sexual rights? Of course, I feel embarrassed. I disagree on that, but it was not the main part of the discussion. But one news portal took it and become big hoo-ha, and there was a petition. But before that, I debated something even bigger, where we are talking about the bill of Undang-Undang Syariah, whether Muslim or non-Muslim, or whether Muslim practitioner only can go to Sharia court. So I said, why not non-Muslim? So the discussion was so interesting, jurisprudential, and knowing Menteri Mujahid, he himself would like to offer his knowledge because he's also a professor. So it was so interesting. But what was picked up and become big hoo-ha, the last part.
Okay.
And not only that.
So missing the reporting
and not only that, I don't blame media, I don't blame anyone, because I see the misunderstood institution. It was wrongly understood. They said that the deputy speaker agreed with what was said. Actually, it was a tradition for the speaker to say, terima kasih atas pandangan-pandangan yang telah dihujahkan. But he not even say he disagreed.
All right, we're going to come back and continue this conversation right here on Consider This. Please stay tuned right here on Asra Money. Welcome back to Consider This. I'm Melisa Idris with Sharaad, Kuttan, and Senator Yusmadi Yusof is on the show with us talking about reforms to the Senate. Now, the proposal that you put forth from this working committee was about the tenure of senators. Right now, if I'm not mistaken, the term for a senator is 3 years, but the proposal is to increase that to 5 years. Why?
Okay. This idea came from the senators and speaker from Canada. They said, what happened in Canada, we should have at least 5 years. Initially, people thought because of for the benefits of the senator to get the pension whatsoever. No, actually, according to him, at least you need someone to be educated to familiarize and say what's their role in Dewan Negara. So by you familiarize yourself for the first year, you try to understand your role in the second year. By the third year, you're about to function effectively, you're out. So according to them, reasonably is 5 years. So is that something new? No. Actually, our constitution allow us to have even 6 years.
So, but wouldn't
but you already have 2 terms, right? You could have possibly 2 terms.
Correct. What happened under constitution? You are appointed by 2 phases. You're allowed to be appointed by 2 phases. First phase, you can be appointed for the first 3 years, but you can be renewed. But that's subject to whoever can be political master, whoever powers that be. So what happened now? The constitution allow it. For me, make best for specific purpose, not for the purpose of, as what you said, to get ineffective senator who are not doing their job, to have a long tenure. So for me, that's a wastage. But for me, if it's about to make the Dewan Negara function effectively, I say, why not? So of course. So now, if you ask me whether that's my priority out of all the 9s, no. That's why I put that as the last, the second last of all the 9s. Because for me, the first 2 important is number 1, the support system, and number 2, the select committee. And of course, thirdly, I have to say the law, to draw the line, to bring the independence of parliament.
Maybe we could very quickly talk about the gender issue, because there was a lot of complaints that Pakatan did not deliver on gender equality, gender parity in the formation of cabinet, and then we also, when you look at parliament, and what is the balance of men to women and so on, and other genders as it were. With Dewan Negara, what's the history? Have there been many women as senators?
So I have to be careful to answer this, otherwise it will be the juicy part of our session. Because Melisa even asked me how come only 2 ladies in my committee.
Yeah, I was looking at the list.
Correct.
I'm not
I tell you how important
14 people
and
only
frankly
2 women.
speaking, this important issue not only been practiced in different way, but sometimes I think something good I need to highlight. The late Tuan Guru Ning Abdul Aziz, I was told, and in fact I saw it in Parliament, by design, he will make sure that representative from Kelantan are 2 caliber, highly qualified ladies. Because I can mention here something good, Senator Mumtaz, highly qualified lady lawyers, Khariyah, and now you have Senator Asmah, was a former lecturer of UiTM. So for me, you can level the gender inequality while not amending the law. There are certain things you can do at the administrative level, of which Ning Aziz did. So, but now I think I don't want that initiative to happen at that level. I want to go to another level whereby we consciously want our Dewan Negara to have gender equality. In other words, the federal appointment, the state appointment has to be more conscious on gender. Why I said so? I believe the future is female.
That's the name of my show, by the way. You can catch that on Saturdays.
Why? At least for me, what I have seen in Dewan Negara and Dewan Rakyat, somehow, somewhere, the big elephant is parochialism. The men can be parochial, and I don't want to use it as racism, can be parochial because they only see within their parameters. You cannot see beyond your parameters. So for me, before you assume that interaction can happen beyond the silo circle, you have to insert it.
Right.
So for me, to have gender equality is something strategic, something a right thing to do.
Right, so breaking that kind of unconscious bias through guidelines, in fact. Now, okay, so in the couple minutes that we have left, I want to know, with this report out, with the proposals for reform, what is the way forward? How do you move this along? What would it take
and do you need public participation in this? I mean, would you benefit from a petition or a campaign run by ordinary people to support reform at the Dewan Negara?
So I have to say this with full of conviction. If government of today don't do it, I think they disappoint the will of the people. Because previously, it will only happen with the will of the government. But now, since we already put that in our manifesto and the people supported us, and at least we have shown it. At least we saw in Dewan Rakyat There are few interesting select committee. Now it's happening. But now in Dewan Negara, for me, the easiest way, the way I look at it, is very simple. It can either come from the speaker himself, who will be mandated with the power. He can initiate that, or to make things more, I would say, historical, something more effective. I wish this report will be sponsored by the minister in charge of Parliament, get the cabinet, endorse it, and come back to us. And more importantly is that to make the reform truly come from the voice of Parliament, not quote-unquote executive bias, because that, again, I have to say, is oxymoron. When you have to parliamentary reform sponsored by another entity, it has to come from Parliament. Well, of course, what I said, theoretically speaking, what I said, how it's going to happen, it has to happen in the nuance of reform, because things is not happen the way we want it. It has to be reformed.
Well, thank you so much for being on the show today. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have on Consider This. I'm Melisa Idris with Sharaad Kuttan, and we will be both back same time tomorrow. Catch us then.
That was great.